So welcome to this final panel where we do nothing less than actually discuss the heart and soul of German industry with the German Trade and Climate Minister and Ole Källenius, the chairman of Mercedes-Benz. So I think we can get very much to the core of how Germany sees itself, but also projects into the world. And I got a quote from you, Mr. Källenius, in advance. So we're talking about how to get the job done, nothing less than actually the energy transition here in Germany. Ole Källenius says, to get the job done, we need a reliable framework conditions, speed, and the right mindset. Above all, we need full conviction that our strategy is right and the confidence and commitment that we will reach our goals. So my first question to you, Minister Habeck, is would you just sign up to that? Or what is the motto that you have basically in your office?
Well, completely, I would just sign it and move on to the work. Of course, you have to add that in an open democracy, in a liberal democracy, strategies and decisions made in the past are always questioned. Once again, this is the right of everyone. So the idea that all members of society, all political participants always agree on everything will never happen, not in an open democracy. But this is just a footnote to what you have just stated. And maybe the best part of the quote from Mr. Källenius, from my point of view, is the attitude with which we are looking at the problems. And there are problems now at time. But if we just look at them and say, oh, big problems, oh, yeah, we look to another side, then we will lose. And if we say, okay, there's a problem, I solve it, then we will win.
I just want to quickly run through all the targets all of you actually definitely have to hit. The EU says climate neutral by 2050. The interim target is 55% emission reduction by 2030. Germany, a reduction by 65% by 2030 and climate neutral by 2045. The G20 say 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions, 80% of global GDP and 2/3 of global population. That's who the G20 are. They want to peak by 2025. All of these are targets that Germany, for instance, cannot be sure at this moment that it can reach. Is that correct?
No, that is not correct, actually. I think we could reach the targets, but of course our political targets or political plans or strategies or programs, whatever you want to say, are always interwoven in other spheres. They need to be financed, for example. So we have to get to this point, we have to mobilize an incredible amount of money. Of course, it's interwoven in the global competition situation. Right now, we see, due to the aggression from Vladimir Putin on Ukraine, still high energy prices, mainly high energy prices in all of the world, but mainly in Germany, because we had to buy the lacking gas on the world market for a higher price. So we have the special German or Central Europe problem. We see a shift away from an open, always friendly globalization to near or friendshoring, IRA. So you see, it's not only having a plan, but it's had always to be adjusted. So we now, my conclusion is, we have to move faster, and we have to bring the energy prices down faster than ever thought, because they are higher than ever thought. Therefore are political measures on the table, but they need money, of course. The money is not in line with the budget rules we have, and this creates a political problem. So yes, we could be on track, we can solve it, but of course we have always adjust our strategies to the reality of the economic situation and the political sphere.
Ole Källenius, how far along are you with your own company aim to get CO2 neutral by 2040. You're spending a lot of money on that. It's an open secret that the German car industry as a whole was very late to the game there. And how are you doing on scope 1, 2, and 3 of that process?
So if you look at the targets that you just mentioned, I'm going to start from the top with 2050, which is a world ambition, really. More or less all nations around the world have signed up to this ambition. And that is what we derived our company strategy from. So we came up with something a few years ago that we call Ambition 2039. So by the end of next decade, we want our business model to be CO2 neutral. And there we talk about the whole value chain, our suppliers, our own operations, obviously the product, the zero emission product, but also the product in use. And from 2019, when we communicated that would be a 20-year time frame. Sounds like a long time, but in the auto industry, that's just 3 product life cycles. So for us, actually not that long. Now, how far have we come? We have started measuring for everything that we sell, what would be the life cycle CO2 burden of that, calculating that a car would run about 200,000 kilometers. Mostly when it's a Mercedes, it's more, but to have some kind of a yardstick to measure it against. And what it looks like is that we peaked in 2020. So in terms of the overall CO2 burden life cycle from all of our products and the products in use, 2020 looked like our peak, and we're now slowly but safely walking down towards those types of targets. Is it going fast enough? Surely not. I mean, there's a level of impatience here. But in terms of capital allocation towards solving this problem, we're definitely putting our money where our mouth is. This year alone, we invest 15 billion euro in R&D, capital investment into our factories around the world and other things. And the lion's share of that goes into technologies that will decarbonize our product. But I want to emphasize, because you mentioned scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1, you could say it's easy, but once you get to 2 and 3, it's more difficult. Automotive is the ultimate team sport. We cannot do this without our supply partners, because so much of the CO2 burden, of course, happens outside of our company or afterwards when the product is in use. And we have now struck agreements with about 90% of our annual volume of buy, as they call it, to follow us on this path. And for many suppliers, we didn't need to wake them up. They were already going. But for some, it was a little bit of a moment for them to hear, okay, maybe I will not be in the sourcing set of Mercedes in the future. Not going to be cut right away, obviously. But if I don't come up with a plan, at some point, I will lose Mercedes as a customer. So we're trying to move the whole system together. And we are making progress, but I'm the first to admit it's a Herculean task. There are so many things left. But in terms of the mindset, we have the mindset that we can do it.
Okay, time here with you is very precious. We only have half an hour, but I still have the ambition to make this a collaborative conversation. So if there are questions in the room, also from your peers, please flag it up to me and I will bring you all into this conversation. How much of the challenges that you are being a bit unspecific about, because there are so many, I guess, are to do with supply chains?
I mean, a lot. If you think about it, we're replacing a technology that we have invented and then perfected for 130 years plus. Now, on the powertrain side, although there are so many technological revolutions going on at the same time, the digital and so on, but if we talk about the powertrain side, essentially our invention that changed the world is based upon burning fossil fuels. Now we have to replace the energy source with another energy source that is not fossil based. Hence, it's an electric drive. It's kind of given that it's electric no matter what non-fossil energy source you use. That is an enormous industrial footprint, and as you say, it's a new supply chain. And I just had the opportunity earlier today to take part in a panel with also Franziska Brandner from your department. Here it feels like we really have a team Germany, team Europe. Because we're working hand in hand in trying to lock up those supply chains. We need lithium, we need nickel, we need manganese, we need cobalt, we need other things. We need rare earths, etc., etc., etc. So we are in a very structured way throughout the whole supply chain and the whole world, mind you, mapping this and step by step putting in measures. And here I would like to thank Minister Habeck and his team for actively helping us doing this. I mean, it's our job to do it. We are the business, but here politics and business are working hand in hand.
And this is, if I may add, something new. When I started the job, the big expectation was to combine climate action and economic growth. That's it, full stop. Now, then Russians' aggression on Ukraine, the war in Ukraine happened, and everyone was like in a shock. Oh, we have to not only to repair our supply chain that we learned by COVID-19, but we have to become sovereign, gain our sovereignty in matters of raw materials, for example. That was not on the table at the end of 2021. Of course, the concern, do we get enough raw materials, was always there. But the strategic decision, being not dependent, let's face it, on one country and China, is new. And of course, this increases higher costs. And now things become more complicated. So the plan, the energy transition plan, has not changed. But the combination with other problems has increased tremendously.
You mentioned China, and there actually are two issues that were partially also raised here. The German Chancellor was here yesterday, basically not being very keen on the investigation into electronic vehicles that were subsidized by China entering the EU market. Do you share that take on this?
Well, first of all, I'd like to add or start in this conference that both, if we look at from a rational point of view, China needs Europe and Germany in Europe, and Europe needs China and Germany in Europe needs China as a market and as a trading partner. This is the ration, and therefore we should work for a better level playing field. Let's call it like this. The politics are otherwise. We have learned that the globalization as known in the past 3 decades has now shifted. People talk about geopolitics, meaning that states are acting in the mindset of interest spheres, and interest spheres are power spheres, and if everything is getting wrong, then also military conflicts could arise. This is a development that deeply concerns me. So we have to do both, work together on a level playing field and not be naive, because the world in a way is changing. This is spoken in regard to raw materials and I don't know, digitalization and everything. The thing is, if in the legal practice is done to harm other economies, German economies, the German automotive economies, and we know it, we can't just look the other side. So to look into it and to find out if this practice is not in line with WTO rules is all right. And then the other side is always there. If this is to be found out, of course, we can try to come to speak in terms and not let, also from my perspective, the worst happen. A war on Texas, for example. This is nothing anyone with a clear mind, a sound mind would like to see. But look into the files, I think, is not wrong.
So specifically, you would want to see the outcome of that investigation, then decide where you stand on that?
To start an investigation, if the potential threat is there, I think it's all right, yes.
Okay. And there's another question on where you see the role of German trade policy in terms of fostering that transition. The German solar industry has had a very hard time in the past. It's currently having a very hard time with a sharp drop in prices. So are you planning a response there?
Well, we have done a question to the industry: are you interested or willing to invest in Germany to produce solar panels also here? And the answers were amazing. A lot of companies with a huge budget of gigawatt raised their hands. The problem is they wanted also a huge budget of subsidies to do that, and this we don't have. But I'm sure that we will identify an amount of concrete fine projects, meaning our plan, maybe some of you know, is to install 22 gigawatt solar every year until 2030. We will reach 12, maybe 13 this year. So coming from 5 to 13, this is something in just 1.5 years' time, but it's not the end. And even if everything is done right, and there are investors into solar industry in Germany that will maybe produce something like 5 gigawatt if we are lucky, so maybe 1/4 of it. So we need also solar panels from around the world, also from China. This is what I'm talking about. When I talk about energy security or sovereignty, it's not to produce everything on our soil. This would be completely nonsense. This is not independency. It's not decoupling. It's not a national economy, German money, German sellers, German buyers, and around us a big wall. This is, I don't know where this idea comes from. Sometimes I read it in the newspaper or I read comments, and it's really astonishing. This is not what I'm aiming to. It's that we get the competence in the critical industries, or hold the competence in the critical industries here in Europe and in Germany, so that we participate in a growing market, but participate in a way that we create something new. And the German solar panels that are now available are more effective, more energy effective than the Chinese ones. They are better in a way, but they are more costly, of course, as well, as Mercedes-Benz is also a premium product.
So are you planning a concrete package?
Yes.
Ole Källenius, you were, how would you characterize the German trade policy in terms of, we just heard that these are very much case-by-case bases for supporting certain industries, and how satisfied is Mercedes with what it's getting out of it?
Let's take a look at our business model first. As a global automotive manufacturer, we have, of course, built up our footprint over many decades. So we have operations around the world. We build most of our cars that we sell in China. We build an overproportional amount of cars in Europe, because this is our natural home. This is where the company was started. And we have very large operations in the United States and in other markets around the world as well. But at the same time, our business model is based upon free and open markets. So I'm going to start with the United States as an example. We and our esteemed colleagues from Munich are, I think, the biggest industrial exporters from the United States to both Europe and China. So any one disturbance in that relationship would severely impact our business. From Europe, we are exporting to the whole world, more than 150 markets, big exports to the big economies, United States and China, but everywhere. And we have started exporting out of China. So the Smart brand, which is now a joint venture with one of our Chinese partners, we are now selling the next generation Smart that we're building in China and here, and powertrains. So open markets with as little protectionism and trade barriers as possible is paramount for our business model. And that is why I very, very much agree and can underline that we would like to have a level playing field. There's not a doubt. We understand, we're not naive. The world is it's a complicated place. But any and every move where the reaction would be, let's raise trade barriers just a little bit, and then maybe the other side does something, and so on and so forth, that is a slippery slope. Certainly for a company like ours, and I believe for German industry as a whole, there is this term Exportweltmeister. Yeah, there's a reason why we've been an export world champion for many decades. It's because of innovation, technology, the products, precision machines, all sorts of different things, great cars, what have you. So I think what we need to do is, in these last 5 or 6 years, where we see more tendencies of protectionism, and we could talk about the Inflation Reduction Act in that context as well, Europe, Germany needs to be a stabilizing force as much as possible, working against that. So I hope that one doesn't jump to conclusion too quickly. Next to the relationship with the two big economic regions, we need to build more relationships. And this is where I think particularly the German government inside the EU. These are trade negotiations that are done on an EU level. But here, Germany is a force for good. It's not Germany, as far as I'm informed, that is holding up Mercosur. It's rather than other players in the EU.
No, we're pushing actually.
Yeah, Germany is pushing
especially
this.
The green side. Of the German
Reaching
government.
out to India, reaching out to Indonesia. We traveled together to Australia. I mean, it's a friendly, good country that we've had business relationships forever and a day. But now we need a more deeper relationship on the raw material side. We struck deals in Canada, Chile, etc., Africa. So we see a lot of activity. There's the complication of getting everybody in the EU on board. And I'm glad I'm a business person, I'm not a politician, because I'm sure that's not an easy task. But at the same time, I think we need to keep our foot on the gas here. So keep on pushing. Because if we want to diversify, maybe reduce reliance on individual markets, well, we have to have more markets then, right? And we are going to do our utmost to exploit any market that we're in. But through trade agreements, if market barriers get reduced, it will open up a bigger opportunity for us. So here I can only encourage the job that has started but has not yet been finished.
Is that a precondition, or does it accelerate the energy transition within your company?
I would say it accelerates the energy transition. We are going to have to spend, just as one individual company, many, many tens of billions of euros to get this done. If that money is not lost in inefficiencies, and a trade barrier is essentially for a business an inefficiency, that capital then gets free to be allocated to something sensible, which is innovation, technology, building new industrial capacity, etc. So let's never forget that capital finds return on investment, and if you lower if you increase the risk and you burden the business case with higher factor cost, you're going to have less economic activity. It's that simple.
Can I ask a question
Yeah.
also? Yes, I understand, of course, the sense of trade barrier and what you are pointing to and meaning, but isn't a secret subsidy in a supportive state with a hidden agenda a jurisdiction that is prohibiting access to markets also a trade barrier? So you see where I'm pointing to. Of course, in a romantic, idealistic world, I completely agree. But how long are we looking the other way when we know, or at least think, that illegal practice is protecting a market?
So let me then describe my impression. But let's look in both directions, east and west. Yes, it is absolutely true that to 99% every economic activity that Mercedes does in Germany, through our own earned cash flow, we pay for ourselves and invest. That is the way business should work, and politics provides a framework. So quite seldom do we go to you and say, could you please be a venture capital investor, and by the way, you're not going to get your money back. Seldom we do this, but we do this in Europe as well. And we are thankful for the build-up of our new, hopefully European battery champion, ACC, that we're doing together with Stellantis and Total, that the EU so far has granted this consortium around 1.2 billion euro in grants. So in essence, Europe is giving us, I mean, we could do it probably without that money, but it improves our competitiveness. Now I go to China and I watch what has happened there over the last 20 or so years. So you have 130 companies selling battery electric vehicles in China. It's far too many. The competition is Darwinistic. In the volume entry segment, there's a price war. For many of those companies, I would say it's more likely than not that provinces that wanted to create jobs, have a sense of pride, etc., primarily in competition with each other, because for the first 15 years it was not obvious at all that any one of these Chinese would be able to go global, but now they're trying. they were in competition with each other. So province 1 against province 2, province 3, and I am absolutely sure that they have gifted some of the investment, like the example I made with ACC, and I'm sure that they have received capital with very little interest, perhaps no interest. And by the way, what I know of Tesla's investment in Shanghai, they have enjoyed the same. It's not a Chinese company, it's a foreign company, and they are exporting those vehicles to Europe on top of the ones that they make here. We have not received perhaps as much subsidies. Now, we were an early mover in China, and you went into joint venture. So in another way, you could say, because we share the investments, the state-owned enterprise that we're operating with, they pay for half the investment, we pay for half the investment. They get a return, we get a return. But it is probably likely that we as a venture have received less subsidies than maybe some of these startups. In the United States, because this is important now, with the Inflation Reduction Act, if we were an American company and we had a fully industrialized, non-export-based relationship with the United States, which we don't, if we had to do that, we would have to close a couple of plants in Germany and build new plants in the United States. We don't have it. It's completely unrealistic. It's politically unrealistic. It's also economically, in the short term, unrealistic. Now, we're going to take advantage of the IRA as much as we can, but we will make some benefit from that. Without naming any names, if I were an American startup selling 600,000 cars in the United States, getting the full $7,500 plus the $4,500 on the purchasing side, the American taxpayer would hand me $7 billion or more every single year. I don't think we're going to get that from Christian Lindner. How are we going to react to that? So I am acutely aware of the imperfections of this direct or indirect protectionism. But if Europe's answer would be, and I'm not saying that it is, that we raise a barrier to negate that advantage, it's going to hurt us more than it's going to help us. So if you do anything, I don't think it is affordable, is you put the same amount of money for the players that do business in Europe. Then it would actually not hurt us, it would help us. I don't think it's politically possible. I think Europe can afford it, but whatever can be done, that's what I would do. And that is why I am worried that such investigations could lead to a tit for tat, and it will be a net minus for us.
So are you still in favor of that investigation? And
well, we had the discussion before, and of course the threat is there, and especially there for German automotive industry. It's not the other automotive producing countries in Europe don't have the same importance on the Chinese markets. So of course, and you know how Europe, or at least you have a feeling how Europe works, it's always interest-raised politics there. So I see the problem. But still, on the other hand, I mean, there are different ways to find to work with the result of such an inquiry. So yes, I think we have to know and to understand how the system in China and the US works. And while we made the same complaint when IRA started, I talked with Secretary Yellen the other day, and we said this is not in line with WTO. And then we worked on different ways to create bridges. I think it's still not in line with WTO, but there are found, or at least are in the making, ways that European car industry, battery industry, and so is not completely excluded. This is not now because I think the truth everyone knows is that the IRA was not directed against Europe. They just forgot about us. And that is a problem. This is telling the story of the globalized world right now. But so they want to help. I'm not so sure that this is the case with China. I think they know exactly what they are doing. And if we say, well, this is maybe not in line with WTO, they won't say, oh, thanks for telling us, we change it now. But still there are various options then on the table to deal with the problem.
Minister Habeck, Ole Källenius, thank you very much for what was a very frank discussion there. And just one final yes or no question, because asked a few days ago, you just cut out your work as supporting to compensate also for disadvantages that industries have. There's a huge debate here in Germany about a discount for industrial energy. You said it was a 50-50 chance. What are the chances right now as you walk out of the store today?
It's 50-50 still.
Okay, just checking in with you.
But you can't, a 50-50 answer is never a yes or no. See? Yeah. That was clever of me, wasn't it?
Even though we're not one of the companies that would be a benefactor, our suppliers would. So if you can turn that to a 51-49, that would be good.
Yes. Well, we have to come for a conclusion for better or worse. But now, I mean, this is now. I made the proposal in May. Now we have September is nearly over. When we're complaining about decision-making, bureaucracy in Brussels and in Berlin, and so this is too long a period for a decision. So could be. I hope for a yes, could also be a no, but no decision is always the worst.
Okay, thank you very much for that discussion. And